My name is Linda Harper, and at 70, I truly believed I had achieved ultimate liberation. After decades of relentless self-reinvention, shedding a suffocating marriage, building a thriving national design firm, navigating complex family expectations, confronting corporate arrogance, enduring intellectual theft, and embarking on radical global adventures, I had found profound, unburdened peace. Harper Creative was a beacon of innovation. My beautiful home in Ukrainian village, a sanctuary. My life, unbound by expectation, vibrated with purpose and joy. The clarity, forged by years of personal transformation and the fierce, clarifying fires of menopause, meant I saw every challenge not as an obstacle, but as a chessboard. Yet, even in this state of profound serenity, a faint, irritating hum persisted. It wasn't a challenge from a demanding client or an entitled child. It was a ghost. My ex-husband, David. Though long divorced, and having retreated from his attempts to control my life, he maintained a carefully constructed narrative of my supposed fragility. He still believed he was the architect of my past stability, implying that my current success was a temporary, almost accidental, phenomenon. To anyone who would listen, mutual acquaintances, lingering family connections, he would subtly imply that he still worried about poor Linda. That she was a bit erratic. That she couldn't really survive without his grounding influence. His narrative was subtle, insidious, and deeply patronizing. It pricked at the hard-won skin of my self-worth. Then came the seemingly casual remark. A friend, innocently relaying David's latest concern about my well-being, mentioning that he still felt responsible for me. In that moment of profound, continued disrespect, the last remaining thread of his subtle control snapped. He thought he was merely preserving his own image, subtly undermining my independence for the benefit of a familiar narrative. He had no idea that his casual arrogance had just provided me with the final, exquisite blueprint for ultimate liberation. He thought he was telling the world I couldn't survive without him. He was about to discover that I was not only surviving, I was thriving, and I was about to literally own the very ground he walked on. This is the story of how my ex-husband's patronizing narrative became the catalyst for a quiet, audacious act, a financial coup that literally made me his landlord, solidifying my freedom and delivering the most satisfying, silent, and undeniable victory of my life. Before I tell you every single, satisfying, and meticulously executed detail of how I turned my ex-husband's lingering arrogance into his ultimate, public humility, I want to invite you into this space. If you've ever had someone underestimate your resilience, or subtly undermine your independence, especially when you thought you were finally free, then hit that subscribe button. This channel is a sanctuary for the unseen architects of their own destinies, a gathering place for women who are reclaiming every inch of their lives and proving that true survival isn't just about breathing, but about absolutely flourishing. You won't want to miss seeing how this unfolds. Part 1. The persistent narrative of concern at 70 years old, my life in Chicago was, by all accounts, a masterwork of self-creation. Harper Creative, my strategic design firm, had blossomed beyond my wildest dreams, establishing a formidable national presence. My townhouse in Ukrainian village was a tranquil haven, a vibrant testament to the peace I had cultivated. I was active, engaged, intellectually stimulated, and deeply connected to my children and grandchildren, Clara. My life was defined by my choices, riding my motorcycle through winding Midwestern roads, sailing on Lake Michigan, mentoring young professionals, and embracing the boundless freedom of global travel. The clarity forged by years of personal transformation, including my midlife journey through menopause, meant I lived with an unwavering self-possession. Yet, even in this profound state of peace, a small, irritating hum persisted. It came from the ghost of my past, David, my ex-husband. Despite our divorce nearly 2 decades prior, his attempts to subtly assert his continued relevance in my life, to frame himself as the stable counterpoint to my erratic independence, never fully ceased. He was still in Chicago, living in a luxurious downtown rental apartment, his career having plateaued years ago. He was David, the once charming sales director whose greatest project had always been his own image. And that image now included him as the long-suffering ex-husband who still worried about poor Linda. I rarely saw David directly. Our interactions were limited to brief, cordial exchanges at major family gatherings orchestrated by our children, Mark and Emily. But the narrative, his narrative, filtered through mutual acquaintances and, occasionally, my children. "Your dad mentioned he saw you riding your motorcycle, Mom," Emily would say, her voice tinged with faint amusement. He said, "Linda's certainly keeping busy. I just hope she's being safe. You know, she tends to be a bit adventurous without someone grounding her." The adventurous was his polite code for reckless, the someone grounding her being himself. Mark, more direct, would sometimes convey David's concerns. "Dad asked about your firm, Mom. He said, Harper Creative is quite the little venture. I hope Linda's not taking on too much. It must be a lot for someone her age. She needs to remember to slow down." His words were always delivered with a veneer of concern, but the underlying message was clear. My ambition was a charming folly, a potential pitfall in my later years, a delicate undertaking that needed his absent approval. He painted me as fragile, as prone to irrational exuberance, without his guiding hand. The insinuation stung. It was a subtle, insidious undermining of my hard-won independence. He portrayed himself as the foundation from which I had deviated, implying that my very success was only possible because of the stable ground he once provided, and that without him, I was somehow inherently unstable. He cultivated an image of responsibility and concern, while subtly implying my recklessness. It was a form of gaslighting, a pervasive narrative he wove for any ear that would listen. He saw my resilience not as my own strength, but as a byproduct of his past stability. He never admitted, to himself or others, that my true liberation had begun the moment I had severed ties with him. My reaction for years was one of quiet exasperation. I would offer calm, factual corrections. "Mark, tell your father Harper Creative is now a national firm, not a little venture, and I have an excellent team. My health is robust, and my adventures are meticulously planned." But the narrative, once released by David, clung stubbornly to those who preferred a predictable story. They wanted to believe that the bold, vibrant woman they saw now was somehow still anchored to the man who had once managed her. It validated their own fears, their own choices. The constant hum of his concern, his subtle public statements about my supposed need for his grounding influence, grated on my nerves. It was like a persistent, irritating fly buzzing around my hard-won peace. My battles against David in the past had been loud, strategic, and definitive. The divorce, the corporate defeat, the locks changed on the brownstone, the sale of his wine collection. Each victory was clear-cut. But this was different. This was a narrative battle, fought in the quieter echoes of social circles. And I, Linda Harper, was done having my story defined by his outdated, condescending script. I was done with his concern. I was done with his invisible hand, trying to pull strings from the shadows. I was ready to demonstrate, definitively, to him and to everyone else, just how profoundly I had not only survived without him, but had truly flourished. The perfect opportunity, as always, would emerge from the unexpected. And I knew exactly where to look. Part 2. The casual condescension and the downtown enclave. The tipping point arrived in early spring. Chicago was emerging from a brutal winter, and the promise of warmer weather usually brought with it a feeling of lightness, of renewal. But for me, it brought the persistent hum of David's lingering narrative. My friend Carol, a sweet, well-meaning woman from my former suburban circle, who, despite my adventures, still lived in a quiet cul-de-sac and occasionally played golf with David, called me one afternoon. "Linda, I just had lunch with David," she chirped, her voice oblivious to the potential discomfort. "He asked about you. He said you seemed really happy. He's so glad you're doing well. He still worries, you know. He really just wants you to be happy. He said he always knew you were resourceful, but he just worries you'll take on too much without a clear strategy." "A clear strategy?" I repeated, my voice tight. The insult, delivered so subtly, resonated with a cold familiarity. He was praising me with faint damnation. He was implying that my life, in its vibrant and unpredictable freedom, lacked the clear strategy he believed only he could provide. He was subtly undermining my autonomy, even as he feigned concern. Yes, Carol continued, completely missing my shift in tone. He was saying how much he misses his old apartment, the beautiful place you had in Lincoln Park. But he loves his new rental downtown. It's in the Elysium Towers in the Loop. He says it's fantastic, very high-end, great views. He was saying how much simpler it is just to rent. No big responsibilities. So much easier for him now. He misses the space, but he loves the simplicity. She rattled off the name of the building with casual ease. Elysium Towers. The name landed with a surprising weight in my mind. My mind, already accustomed to extracting information from seemingly benign conversations, registered every detail. Elysium Towers. A well-known, ultra-luxury residential skyscraper in the heart of the Loop, a prominent fixture of Chicago's glittering skyline. It was known for its sleek design, its panoramic views of Lake Michigan, and its exorbitant rents. David, predictably, would be living in such a place. It perfectly aligned with his image of effortless success, a curated haven reflecting his continued status, even after our divorce. He thought he had simplified his life. Yes, but he had simplified it to maintain his own singular comfort, a luxurious bachelor pad reflecting his unburdened freedom from managing a demanding family. He wanted no big responsibilities. No children, no wife, no household. Just his tailored suits, his golf clubs, and his high-rise view. My thoughts drifted to David's casual contempt, his dismissive confidence that I simply couldn't survive without him. His subtle undermining of my resilience, his persistent need to remind me of his past grounding influence, his implicit judgment that my vibrant independence was simply a lucky, temporary deviation from his foundational stability. He believed I was a ship adrift, destined to circle back to his harbor, or at least acknowledge his guiding light from afar. He was mistaken. The phrase, "no big responsibilities," echoed in my ears. He reveled in his freedom from perceived burdens. And in doing so, he subtly highlighted my own past burden, managing his life, his home, his schedule, his needs, all while suppressing my own. And now, he had acquired the ultimate no big responsibilities life, renting in an ultra-luxury building, outsourcing all the complexities of ownership. A cold, precise plan began to crystallize in my mind. He thought he had shed all big responsibilities, trading them for unencumbered luxury. He believed he was completely free of the tangible burdens of ownership. He was about to discover, with devastating clarity, just how profoundly intertwined responsibility and ownership could become, and how they could very precisely land directly on his new, unburdened doorstep. He couldn't survive without him. He would soon learn just how much I was thriving, and just how much of his current, convenient existence now depended entirely on my decision. The irony was going to be exquisitely, profoundly personal. My radical clarity, forged in menopause, meant I was done with subtle. This was about to be direct. Part 3. The cold calculus of strategic acquisition, the innocuous revelation of David's apartment building, Elysium Towers in the Loop, landed in my mind like a precisely targeted missile. Carol's casual chatter became the unwitting trigger for my next, most profound act of self-sovereignty. His narrative of my supposed inability to survive without him, a narrative subtly woven into every conversation, was about to meet a crushing, undeniable reality. He was about to find out that not only could I survive without him, but I could thrive so spectacularly that I could literally purchase the very roof over his head. My first call, after politely ending the conversation with Carol, was not to a personal acquaintance or a family member. It was to Marcus Sterling, the CEO of Unity Ventures, my key client, whose deep network extended far beyond venture capital into Chicago's commercial real estate elite. He valued discretion, strategic vision, and utterly unconventional solutions. He was the perfect confidant for a project of this magnitude. Marcus, I began, my voice calm, but with an underlying current of excitement. I have a highly unusual, yet potentially very intriguing, strategic project I need to discuss. It's a personal venture, but it involves leveraging unique insights into the Chicago commercial real estate market, and it requires absolute discretion. Marcus, whose intellectual curiosity was boundless, listened intently. He had seen my strategic mind at work in high-stakes corporate environments. He knew I rarely called without a compelling reason. Intriguing, Linda, he'd said. You have my full attention. What exactly are you looking at? Elysium Towers, I stated, the words sounding almost casual. I want to acquire the building. Discreetly. And efficiently. I need to know every single detail. Its ownership structure, its valuation, any current investors, and the most effective way to approach an acquisition without generating undue attention. I need a master plan for purchasing this building. There was a moment of stunned silence on his end. Marcus Sterling, a man who dealt in multi-million-dollar investments daily, was clearly taken aback by the sheer audacity of my proposal. Elysium Towers was one of Chicago's premier luxury residential buildings, a significant asset, likely valued in the hundreds of millions. Linda, he finally managed, his voice tinged with incredulity. That's an incredibly ambitious target. A building like that isn't typically on the open market. It's usually owned by large institutional investors or long-standing real estate funds. I understand that, Marcus, I replied, my voice unwavering. My objective is not to acquire just any building. It's to acquire this specific building. And I believe my financial position, coupled with the right strategic approach, makes this feasible. I then briefly outlined my current liquidity, a testament to the immense financial success of Harper Creative and my astute investments, far exceeding what even David had ever managed. My voice was a calm, dispassionate reflection of hard, undeniable facts. Marcus, a shrewd financier, immediately grasped the scale of my capability. All right, Linda, he said, a note of genuine admiration entering his voice. You always were good at finding unconventional paths. I have a partner in a very prominent real estate investment firm, Sterling Capital Partners, no relation to my former company, thankfully, who specializes in off-market, high-value acquisitions. He's incredibly discreet. His name is Robert Vance. I'll make the introduction. But be warned, this will be a complex negotiation. Complex is what I do, Marcus, I replied, a small, knowing smile touching my lips. Thank you. Your discretion, as always, is appreciated. The stage was set. This wasn't about building a company or setting boundaries. This was about a direct, personal, and profoundly ironic assertion of ultimate sovereignty. I was going to literally own David's peace of mind. Over the next few weeks, I immersed myself in the arcane world of commercial real estate acquisition. Robert Vance, Marcus Sterling's referral, was a formidable professional. He was in his late 60s, with a keen intellect and a dry wit. He looked at me, not with surprise at my age or gender, but with an almost immediate recognition of my quiet resolve. You're an unusual client, Linda, he'd said in our first meeting in his sprawling downtown office. Most people buy buildings for profit. You, I suspect, are buying for something else. Call it strategic optimization of personal peace, I replied. He had simply nodded, a knowing gleam in his eye. Robert's team began their due diligence. They unearthed the current owner, a large, international investment trust based out of Singapore. The building was indeed profitable, but there were subtle indications that the trust might be open to an unsolicited offer, perhaps due to a pending rebalancing of their global portfolio. My financial advisor, Vivian Chong, meticulously prepared the necessary funds, ensuring every transaction was completely legal, fully transparent to all but the ultimate beneficiary, me. This was more than a financial transaction. It was a declaration, a quiet, calculated answer to every dismissal, every condescending remark David had ever uttered. He told everyone I couldn't survive without him. He was about to find out that I could literally own the ground beneath his feet. The game had truly begun. And I, Linda Harper, was playing for the ultimate stakes. Part 4. The discrete ballet of acquisition, the acquisition of Elysium Towers, became my primary focus, a high-stakes chess match played out with absolute discretion in the bustling, yet utterly oblivious, backdrop of Chicago. The legal team, led by Robert Vance and my own financial advisor, Vivian Chong, were meticulous. Their silence was as important as their strategy. David, blissfully unaware, continued to reside in his luxurious rental, complaining occasionally about the building's quirks to mutual acquaintances, never knowing the subtle machinery of its imminent transfer of ownership was turning precisely for him. The process of acquiring a major commercial property, especially one not publicly on the market, is a complex ballet of negotiations, due diligence, and legal maneuvers. Robert Vance was a master choreographer. We communicated primarily through secure channels, holding quiet, often late-night meetings in his downtown office or sometimes my Ukrainian village townhouse. I reviewed intricate financial models, examined detailed tenant leases, and delved into the minutiae of property management with a focus that rivaled my most challenging corporate branding projects. My mind, sharp and utterly clear, thrived on the complexity. The owners, a Singapore-based investment trust, initially played hard to get. Their portfolio was strong, the building profitable. But Robert identified their subtle pain points: a desire to liquidate a specific portion of their U.S. assets to reinvest in emerging Asian markets, and a preference for a single, discrete cash buyer to avoid a protracted, public sale. My financial power, the sheer liquidity I commanded, became our ultimate leverage. I could move quickly, silently, without external financing, a fact that drastically shortened their timeline and reduced their exposure. I was the ideal buyer for their hidden agenda. The offers went back and forth, a carefully calibrated dance. Each negotiation, each counterproposal, was an exercise in strategic patience. I didn't rush. I didn't overpay. I was determined to secure the building at a fair, but uncompromising, price. My past battles against David's arrogance had honed my ability to identify weakness and exploit it, not with malice, but with a cold, clear precision. My initial goal had been just vindication. Now it was becoming a shrewd, impactful investment. The property would generate significant, long-term revenue. My final act of defiance was also becoming a brilliant financial asset. During this period, David continued to be a persistent, if unwitting, source of information. He would occasionally complain to Emily or Mark about his building, the recent elevator maintenance that took too long, the slight delay in a package delivery, a small leak in the garage that management was taking forever to fix. These were minor inconveniences, his latest gripes about his outsourced responsibilities. And each complaint, relayed back to me by my unsuspecting children, who found his petty complaints tedious, filled me with a quiet, knowing satisfaction. He was complaining about my building. His current source of minor irritation was about to become his profound, personal nightmare. I made a point of not communicating with David at all. No shared lunches, no brief chats at family events. My absence was a deliberate silence, designed to lull him into a false sense of security. He would assume I was still wrapped up in my own hobbies and travels, too busy, or perhaps too clueless, to be tracking his elegant, unburdened existence. He never suspected. That was his greatest vulnerability, his profound inability to see beyond his own self-importance. The final agreement was reached on a crisp September afternoon. The sum was staggering, in the hundreds of millions, a testament to the scale of Chicago's luxury real estate market. My signature, firm and precise, etched onto the complex legal documents, transformed my personal act of vindication into a profound commercial reality. Elysium Towers was now mine. My final act of independence was signed, sealed, and delivered. The previous owner, the Singapore Trust, completed the sale under a newly formed, anonymous holding company, ensuring my name would not appear on any public-facing ownership documents. I remained the unseen architect of my own triumph, the ultimate owner. And David, the man who believed he held absolute dominion over his life, was now unknowingly a tenant in my vast, silent empire. The irony was exquisite. And the silence was about to become his profound public shock. Part 5. The Unseen Landlord and the Seeds of Discomfort. With the acquisition of Elysium Towers finalized, I formally stepped into my role as David's unseen landlord. The building, now technically my property, hummed with a quiet, efficient energy, utterly unaware of the seismic shift that had just occurred in its ownership. My investment wasn't just symbolic, it was a substantial commercial venture. But it was also the ultimate act of strategic assertion, a profound answer to every dismissal David had ever uttered about my inability to survive without him. My initial objective was subtle: to establish a professional, efficient property management system that operated with absolute anonymity, especially to its long-term tenants. Robert Vance, my real estate lawyer, recommended a top-tier property management firm in downtown Chicago, Premier Property Solutions, known for its discreet approach to luxury residential buildings. I signed the contracts under the new anonymous LLC, Riverbend Properties, a nod to the Chicago River outside the building's windows and my own bend towards ultimate freedom. I gave Premier Property Solutions a clear directive: manage the building with professionalism and efficiency, ensuring seamless operations for all tenants. But for David's specific unit, I had one unique, almost undetectable instruction: ensure every interaction, however small, with Mr. David Harper was conducted with an unwavering adherence to the letter of his lease agreement. No preferential treatment, no exceptions, no allowances for the charming arrogance he usually displayed. His rent payments, which had previously been processed with a casual indulgence due to his social standing with the old owners, were now expected precisely on the 1st of every month. His minor requests for repairs, which were previously met with prompt, sometimes overeager, service, were now handled strictly within the standard lease terms and response times. Each slight adjustment, perfectly legal and professionally unremarkable, was designed to introduce a persistent hum of low-level discomfort into David's seemingly effortless life. I received monthly reports from Premier Property Solutions, tenant complaints, maintenance logs, rent collection data. I devoured the details. My eyes always scanned for Unit 18B, David's unit. The complaints were almost always the same: minor inconveniences, a slight delay in getting a package from the concierge, a minor discrepancy in his gym access card, a brief outage of hot water during a scheduled maintenance period. These were the trivial irritations of luxury urban living, the kind of things David would typically dismiss as first-world problems. But he hated them. He railed against them, usually to my children. "Mom," Emily would complain, her voice tinged with exasperation during our weekly calls, "Dad's having a fit. He said the new building management is a nightmare. He complained they took 2 days to fix his leaky faucet." 2 days. Can you believe it? I'd smile, a quiet, knowing smile. "Well, dear," I'd reply, my voice calm, "it sounds like they're just adhering to the standard lease terms. Not everyone gets preferential treatment, you know." My subtly pointed observation, of course, went over her head. Emily just sighed, attributing it to Dad's general grumpiness. My greatest satisfaction came from the rent payments. David had, for years, prided himself on his impeccable financial reputation, always paying bills exactly on time. But he was also a man who occasionally leveraged his status. His last landlords had allowed him a grace period of a few days, subtly implying his importance. My property management team, however, followed their instructions with unyielding precision. On the 2nd of the month, a polite, automated email would be sent if rent was not yet received. On the 3rd, a formal notification. All perfectly standard. All utterly infuriating to a man accustomed to casual deference. David began to complain to everyone about the new, faceless, corporate landlord who had no understanding of tenant relations and was clearly trying to squeeze every last penny. He railed against the subtle changes, the new, stricter recycling rules, the increased guest parking fees, the requirement for prior approval for loud gatherings in communal spaces after 10 p.m. These were all common, reasonable policies in luxury residential buildings. But for David, They felt like personal affronts. His casual, unchecked freedom, his assumption of a bespoke experience tailored to his preference, was slowly being eroded. He thought he was living in a hassle-free, no responsibilities environment. He was unknowingly living under the meticulously calibrated control of the woman he had consistently underestimated. The master plan, rooted in his dismissive statement that I couldn't survive without him, was unfolding beautifully. He was still physically present in Chicago, living in his luxurious high-rise, but his peace of mind, his unquestioned sense of sovereignty, was slowly, subtly, being eroded. The ultimate irony, that the woman he thought incapable of navigating the complexities of modern life was now managing his very existence, remained gloriously, profoundly unknown to him. The stage was set for the ultimate unveiling, and his increasing discomfort was merely a prelude to his most profound, public humiliation. Part 6. The mounting pressure and the unsuspecting tenant. As the months unfolded, the quiet pressure on David mounted, precisely calibrated by my directives to Premier Property Solutions. My aim was not to evict him through petty harassment, but to make his self-proclaimed, hassle-free life increasingly, persistently inconvenient. Each new standard policy, each minor enforcement of a long-ignored lease clause, chipped away at his composure. His casual complaints about his new, faceless landlord intensified, becoming a regular topic of discussion with Mark and Emily, who, bless their hearts, merely saw it as their father's predictable grumbling. The building under my strategic ownership saw a series of legitimate, albeit strategically timed, upgrades. I had new, high-efficiency windows installed on the upper floors, improving energy efficiency for many units. I mandated upgrades to the building's digital security system, requiring all tenants to re-register their key fobs and access codes, a minor inconvenience for most, but a significant disruption for David, who hated paperwork. I even subtly increased the building's base temperature in the common areas by a few degrees, just enough to be comfortable for most residents, but subtly warmer for David, who, thanks to my earlier strategic intervention, now preferred his comfort precisely. Every element was a gentle, almost imperceptible turn of the screw. David, oblivious, raged against these changes. He wrote angry emails to Premier Property Solutions, demanding explanations, hinting at legal action. He complained to Emily about the increased noise from the window installation. "It's relentless, honey. They're just trying to drive up the rents. This new management is terrible." He never suspected that the source of his escalating frustration was the woman he claimed could not survive without him. His complaints were a constant, albeit unseen, source of quiet satisfaction for me. My focus, however, extended beyond David. Elysium Towers was a substantial commercial investment. I had Robert Vance, my real estate lawyer, and his team begin a meticulous long-term strategy to enhance the building's value. This involved identifying new, high-value commercial tenants for the ground-floor retail spaces, negotiating more favorable long-term contracts with vendors, and subtly enhancing the building's amenities to attract even higher-paying residents. My quiet management, my precision in executing these strategies, allowed the building's value to soar, increasing my investment returns. This vindication was not just personal, it was proving my acute business acumen on a scale he could not comprehend. The final element of pressure came with his lease renewal. David's existing lease, signed with the previous owners, was expiring in 3 months. Premier Property Solutions, following my exact instructions, sent him a new lease agreement. It was entirely standard, completely within market rates, but it included a notable rent increase, just enough to make him complain, but not so much that he couldn't afford it. Crucially, it stipulated a non-negotiable 2-week window for renewal, after which his unit would be marketed to new tenants at a higher rate. This was normal commercial practice. But for David, it was an unprecedented threat to his sense of effortless control. "Mom," Mark called me one evening, a mix of amusement and genuine exasperation in his voice. "Dad is losing it. He just got his lease renewal. He says the new rent is insane, and they gave him a deadline. He's talking about moving out. Can you believe this new management?" He said he might have to move to a less prestigious building. It's totally stressing him out. Well, dear, I replied calmly, market rates change. And deadlines are standard in commercial leases. He'll adjust. I knew he would adjust. But he would adjust to my terms. His rage, his frantic complaints, his profound discomfort were the sweet music of my final victory. He was complaining about being managed by a faceless corporation, never suspecting that the face he found so difficult to live with was now his quiet, omnipresent landlord. He believed he was the ultimate free agent. He was about to learn the profound cost of that illusion. The moment was fast approaching. The time for the ultimate unveiling. Part 7. The uninvited meeting and the orchestrated revelation. The date of David's lease renewal deadline loomed large. His frantic calls to Mark and Emily intensified. He scouted other luxury rentals in downtown Chicago, grumbling about greedy landlords and faceless corporate entities. His typical arrogance was replaced by a simmering resentment. He genuinely believed he was a victim of circumstance, completely unaware of the invisible strings being pulled above him. He knew only discomfort, and it was exactly as I had intended. 2 days before the deadline, David, desperate and frustrated, called Mark and Emily. He orchestrated one final family meeting. My apartment was, of course, chosen as the venue. He probably hoped to gain moral support, to complain about the unfairness of the new building management, and perhaps, subtly, to persuade me to use some of my financial connections to put pressure on Premier Property Solutions. He expected a captive, sympathetic audience. He thought he was coming to complain. He had no idea he was walking into his final reckoning. I prepared the loft with meticulous care. The atmosphere was calm, serene, utterly at peace. The thermostat was set to my perfect 67 degrees. There were fresh flowers. Soft, subtle jazz music played in the background. My exquisite chessboard was prominently displayed on the coffee table, a visual metaphor for the game that was about to conclude. They arrived promptly, at 7 p.m. David, looking harried and visibly strained, clutched a copy of his new lease renewal. Mark and Emily looked uneasy, caught between their father's grievances and their increasing respect for my quiet autonomy. "Mom," Emily began, her voice soft, "Dad's having some issues with his apartment. The new management is being really difficult." "Difficult is an understatement," David interjected, launching into his well-rehearsed monologue of grievances. "Linda, this new management company at Elysium Towers is an absolute nightmare. They increased my rent by 15%, and they gave me a 2-week deadline. No negotiations. After I've been a loyal tenant for years. It's outrageous. Who owns this place, anyway? They won't even give me a direct contact." He slammed his lease on the coffee table, the pages fluttering. "I told them I wouldn't be bullied." He paused, taking a dramatic breath. Mark and Emily listened, offering sympathetic noises. My silence was absolute. My heart pounded with a quiet, exhilarating purpose. This was it. "David," I said, my voice calm, utterly devoid of emotion, "I believe I can offer you some insight into the new management." He looked at me, surprised. "You know something about them? Maybe you have a contact? This is great. You've always been resourceful, Linda. You could talk some sense into them." He leaned forward, hopeful, utterly unsuspecting. He wanted me to rescue him from the faceless corporation. "Indeed, I do," I replied, meeting his hopeful gaze with a cool, unwavering stare. "I know the new management intimately. In fact, I am the management." The words landed in the room with the force of a sudden, brutal shockwave. Mark's eyes widened, his jaw dropping. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her face paling. David's eyes, wide with disbelief, slowly, disbelievingly, moved from my calm face to the lease agreement on the table, then back to me, trying desperately to process the impossible. What are you talking about, Linda?" David stammered, his voice hoarse, disbelieving. You're implying you know who owns Elysium Towers?" "No, David," I corrected, a small, knowing smile finally touching my lips. "I'm not implying. I am stating unequivocally, that I am Riverbend Properties, LLC. I am the legal owner of Elysium Towers. And as of 2 months ago, I became your landlord. His face went utterly white. The realization, cold and undeniable, washed over him, shattering his carefully constructed reality. His perfect downtown rental, his unburdened peace of mind, his ultimate freedom from responsibility, all of it had just collapsed into a profound, personal nightmare engineered by the very woman he claimed couldn't survive without him. The ultimate confrontation. The perfect irony. And the game was finally definitively over. Part 8. The shattering of control and the public truth. David sat frozen, utterly speechless. His body, once so arrogant and controlled, was now rigid with a combination of shock, disbelief, and mounting horror. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, darted between Mark and Emily's stunned faces, then back to my own, which remained perfectly composed. The atmosphere in my quiet living room was thick with the silent aftermath of a tactical nuclear strike. He had walked into my sanctuary, expecting a sympathetic ear, and instead found himself trapped in his own carefully constructed prison of irony. You bought the building? David finally choked out, his voice a raw whisper, barely audible above the sudden, ringing silence in the room. Elysium Towers? My building. My building, David. I corrected him, my voice soft, but unwavering. Purchased 2 months ago. You have been paying rent, promptly on the 1st of every month, directly into my account, managed by my property management firm, Premier Property Solutions. He slumped back onto the sofa, the lease agreement still clutched in his hand, a testament to his own unwitting compliance. His carefully cultivated image of being the effortlessly unencumbered, sophisticated bachelor, thriving after his divorce, shattered before his eyes. He had boasted about his simple, responsible life. He had boasted about not owning a complex property. And now, he discovered that he was a tenant in his ex-wife's vast, quiet empire. His deepest fear, of being controlled, of losing his autonomy, had just become his new, inescapable reality, orchestrated by the woman he had consistently underestimated. Mark, having recovered from his initial shock, slowly, subtly, began to process the implications. His pragmatic mind, so focused on business and assets, finally grasped the immense scale of my quiet triumph. He looked at me with a new expression, a profound blend of awe, respect, and, perhaps, a hint of genuine fear. This was not just Mom. This was a force of nature. Emily, ever the emotional one, seemed to hover on the edge of tears, not for David, but for the raw, human drama unfolding before her. She saw his utter humiliation, his complete undoing, laid bare by my quiet, devastating truth. She remembered her father's past dismissals of my perceived fragility. She remembered his comments that I couldn't survive without him. The full, terrible irony was now manifest. But why, Linda? David whispered, his voice broken. Why would you do this? After all these years? You spent years telling anyone who would listen that I couldn't survive without you, David. I replied, my voice calm, every word a deliberate, precise stroke. That my independence was erratic, that I needed your grounding influence. You cultivated a narrative of my dependence to uphold your own fragile image of indispensable masculinity. You subtly diminished my hard-won peace. My decision to acquire Elysium Towers, your chosen haven of unburdened luxury, was simply my ultimate response. I wanted to demonstrate, unequivocally, that not only could I survive without you, but I could thrive so spectacularly that I could literally become the landlord of your preferred existence. My freedom, David, means absolute sovereignty, even over your convenience. He stared at me, defeated, his face ashen. He was a man who lived and breathed perception, and his perfect facade had just crumbled. His narrative of my dependency, his casual assertion of my weakness, was now irrefutably, profoundly false. And the ultimate humiliation, It had been revealed by the very woman he claimed needed him. He had spent his life controlling his narrative. I had just purchased his physical reality. The final element of the confrontation, the lease. I gestured to the contract lying on the coffee table. You have until tomorrow to sign your new lease, David. At the new rate. Standard terms. No preferential treatment. Your choice. Renew your tenancy or move out. His gaze fixed on the lease, then on my face. He had no power. He had no control. He was utterly at my mercy, his freedom now a choice offered to him by the woman he had consistently underestimated. The ultimate price of his arrogance was the loss of his long-held illusion of control. And the public truth was about to be undeniable. My silent change had not only defined my own survival, it had shaped his stark new reality. The game was won. And I, Linda Harper, owned the board. Part 9. The Final Act of Sovereign. Ownership. The confrontation concluded with David in utter disarray. He left my condo that night a broken man, his swagger replaced by profound humiliation. Mark and Emily remained behind, their faces etched with a complex mix of shock, awe, and a newfound, almost overwhelming respect for me. Mom, Emily whispered after David had stumbled out. I can't believe it. You actually bought his building? He really doesn't have anywhere else to go tonight, does he? He has options, Emily, I replied calmly. He's a resourceful man. And the Peninsula Hotel is still operating. He'll find his way. My lack of malice, my steady calm, seemed to unnerve them more than any rage could have. Mark, the pragmatic one, sat down, pulling out his tablet, his eyes fixed on me. Mom, he said, his voice quiet, that was a strategic masterpiece. The scale of it, the timing, the sheer audacity. You actually turned his casual insult into your ultimate act of financial dominance. It's brilliant. He looked at me with open admiration. Honestly, he deserved it. After everything he said about you. He never knew you. He really never knew you. The truth, acknowledged by my children, was a powerful bomb. The final thread of David's influence, his ability to subtly control my narrative, was completely severed. My revenge was not just my freedom. It was their understanding. It was the undeniable reality of my triumph, a truth they now held and would undoubtedly, eventually, subtly convey to our broader social circle. David eventually signed the lease. He had no other viable option on such short notice that could maintain his perceived status. He continued to live in his unit at Elysium Towers, now paying rent directly to the property management firm that unknowingly worked for me. The irony was exquisite. He continued his daily life in downtown Chicago, meeting clients, frequenting his clubs, always under my unspoken, unseen dominion. His subtle complaints about the new management persisted, but now they carried a profound, private bitterness. He knew. And his knowledge of my ultimate power was his perpetual, silent torment. I continued to manage Elysium Towers through my anonymous LLC. It was a thriving asset in my diversified portfolio, generating significant income that further fueled Harper Creative and my boundless adventures. I received monthly reports detailing all tenant interactions, including Unit 18B, David's file, every on-time rent payment, every maintenance request, every complaint about the trivial inconveniences of his life in my building filled me with a quiet, profound sense of triumph. My victory was not just in purchasing a building. It was in asserting the ultimate, undeniable sovereignty over my life, even over the very ground my ex-husband walked on. My health continued to flourish. At 70, my body was vibrant, my mind sharp, my spirit utterly unbound. The journey of menopause, which had once presented physical challenges, had become the catalyst for an unyielding mental clarity. It had burned away all pretense, all tolerance for disrespect, leaving only courage, strength, and an absolute commitment to my own truth. David had said I couldn't survive without him. He had just funded the ultimate demonstration of how magnificently I had not only survived, but thrived. My entire life became the living, breathing proof that his narrative was nothing but a hollow echo. My final act of freedom was also my greatest, most powerful investment. Part 10. The last laugh of a life lived free. I am now 75. My life in Chicago continues to be a vibrant testament to an unbound spirit and unapologetic self-sovereignty. Harper Creative flourishes, a global leader in purpose-driven design. My homes, the serene townhouse in Ukrainian village and a newly acquired lakeside cottage for tranquil escapes, are havens reflecting my adventurous, yet peaceful, soul. I still ride my motorcycle, not cross-country anymore, but through the winding roads of my life, the wind on my face a constant reminder of the pure exhilaration of choosing my own path. Every single birthday now is a grand celebration of what's possible, not what's expected. My relationships with Mark and Emily, now successful adults with their own growing families, are built on a bedrock of unwavering respect. They see me not just as mom, but as Linda Harper, the living embodiment of limitless possibility. They openly cite my journey as their true inspiration, seeking my advice on courage, boundaries, and how to live a life genuinely aligned with one's values. My grandchildren, now navigating their own path, look at me with wide, admiring eyes. They see a grandmother who taught them that strength lies in radical authenticity, that every challenge is a chessboard, and that true freedom is priceless. This, I realized, is my most profound legacy, not money, not titles, but the living example of unscripted joy and radical self-sovereignty. David, my ex-husband, still resides in Unit 18B at Elysium Towers. He is now 77. His life, a carefully curated exercise in maintaining a fragile illusion of control, continues under my unspoken purview. He still complains about the new management, oblivious to the deeper irony. His arrogance, once his defining trait, has softened into a weary resignation. His career long since peaked, his social circle diminished. He exists in a world largely of his own making, unaware that the quiet force that shaped his reality is the very woman he claimed could not survive without him. His existence, meticulously maintained by my property management firm, is the constant, subtle reminder of the profound cost of underestimation. He thought he was free from responsibility. He had no idea he was merely living under my rules. The path of my life, once so neatly defined by societal expectations and subtle familial pressures, is now boundless. I am no longer just Linda Harper, the one who shed a marriage or sold a company. I am Linda Harper, the woman who embraced her age as an invitation to radical self-discovery. The silent change was not a diminishment. It was an expansion. It was the quiet, roaring liberation of a spirit finally unleashed. And the road ahead, for me, stretches infinitely, filled with adventure, purpose, and the exhilarating hum of a life lived exactly on my own terms. My journey continues unbounded, unscripted, and undeniably, wonderfully mine. My life, now a beacon for others, proves that true survival isn't just about breathing. It's about unapologetically flourishing, owning every single inch of your extraordinary life, even the ground beneath the feet of your former tormentors. Linda turns to address the camera directly. She is in a sleek, modern, yet warmly inviting living room of her own, overlooking the vibrant Chicago skyline. She radiates quiet confidence and undeniable power, a subtle, serene smile on her face. Have you ever had an ex-partner or someone who underestimated you subtly continue to weave a narrative of your supposed weakness, even after you've broken free? Did they ever imply you couldn't survive without them, even as you flourished? And what was the moment, that quiet, searing realization, when you decided to deliver the ultimate, undeniable proof of your absolute self-sovereignty? Tell me your story in the comments below. Let's talk about the final, liberating acts of defiance, the profound satisfaction of truly owning your narrative, and the power of turning others' underestimation into your ultimate triumph. Your journey of radical self-discovery might be the exact inspiration someone else needs to finally reclaim every inch of their extraordinary life. And if you're ready to write your own glorious final act, If you're ready to claim your undisputed sovereignty over every aspect of your life, make sure you subscribe to The Silent Change After 50. We are building a powerful community where women over 50 are breaking free, owning their narratives, and proving that the last laugh truly belongs to those who dare to live their truth unbound. Join us.